Hello, everyone. It's Paul at the Garland County Library, and today we're here for episode 2 in the ongoing Coming Home series. And this program series is presented by Kimberly Lew, who is the vice chair of the SWAP Coalition to Prevent and End Homelessness. And Ms. Kimberly Lew will discuss the topic of homelessness and helping those in need here in Arkansas. And she leads a conversation about solutions and hurdles surrounding the issue. And she has a special guest today, Paula Stewart, who I'll let her introduce more thoroughly, but we'll add them here. So welcome to both of you. And perhaps you could start by explaining why you're wearing a raccoon costume.
Welcome and thank you to the library for having me here to host this program, just to talk about the issues in our community, about people who do not have a place to sleep at night that's indoors or to stay during the day, and my desire personally to help resolve that in Hot Springs and Garland County. And I'm wearing this raccoon outfit because my friend and neighbor Paula said that she might be nervous coming here today. And I thought that I could relieve that nervousness by being silly. And a raccoon for me is an animal that lives by its wits outdoors, in community, around humans, trying to get its needs met. And it seemed like a nice symbol for what we are going to discuss. I would also like to mention that we are wearing masks, and since everyone in the room is fully vaccinated and boosted, that I feel that we have all met our community responsibilities to reduce the spread of a disease that we are not certain as to what its transmissibility and deadliness is. I think that there are a fair number of people who recognize the deadliness of this disease because their friends and neighbors have in fact died. So I would encourage everyone in our community to love their neighbors, respect the needs and limitations of others, and if you are capable of taking a vaccine, then please do, because we've had the original strain of the COVID, and then we've had the Delta variant. And as our Christmas and holiday season is coming upon us, we have a thing called Omicron, which means that I'm learning more of the Greek alphabet than I ever expected. And I do not want to see Omega, so please mask in public with unknown neighbors. And if you have the ability, please vaccinate, because I think it's important to respect the needs and limitations of others.
Can I make a little statement about vaccination?
So Paula Stewart started as my neighbor, became my friend, and now is a cohort. She is a retired nurse. Her most recent nursing engagement was in the psych ward.
Oh, yeah.
So she has a lot to say about health and medicine. So what is your vaccination? Oh.
Well, what I was going to comment was I was unfortunate last December, and I became infected with COVID before we even had the availability of getting a shot. There were no shots in this town to be had. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to get your vaccination, to get boosted. It's no fun. And I was very fortunate that I did not have to go to the hospital, but I was still miserable for at least 2 weeks. That was pretty rocky. So get your vaccinations. Come on. Don't be fools.
Oh, I guess now is the time to have the disclaimer that these opinions are our own and do not reflect the opinions of the public library or any of the organizations of which I am a member. including the SWAP, Southwest Arkansas Partnership Local Homeless Coalition, or the Unity Coalition that's designed for equity in our community.
Well, I will not hesitate to say what I think.
That's right, which is why I invited you here. So let us look at slide number 2 and see. Number 1 is community strength starts with safe shelter for all. That's my byline. But this slide is a word cloud about when the word homelessness was brought up to a number of people. These are the words that came to mind, and then their size is the frequency with which the idea came to mind. So homelessness, homeless person, poverty, beggar, vagrant, despair, dirty, poor, hobo, tramp, charity, loneliness. And in this program, we like to kind of discuss all the stereotypes that humans have around being unsheltered. And when I first met Paula, among the first things that I learned was Paula is also a Hot Springs native, born and bred. And as someone who came from somewhere else, understanding this community was an interesting challenge. And Paula was very generous in both her behavior and her welcoming for me to better understand kind of the dynamics that were going on. And then by your nature, you're incredibly charitable, in my opinion.
Thank you for that.
You help people in nursing. You understood a lot of psychiatric issues. You continue to offer and assist aid with people that, you are a collector of strays, in my opinion, both human and animal.
Oh, yeah.
And you have no problem in reaching out and helping others that you deem to need help.
How can you not? How can you see something and not do something? I've never been part of a group. I feel like when something is presented to me, it's something I need to do something about. If somebody says something or asks for something, I don't feel like it's my place to ask them, how did you get like this? What is your circumstance? What is going on in your life? It's the best thing to say is, what can I do to help you? I bring it down to, are you hungry? Can I get you something to eat? Do you need socks? Socks is my big thing with the homeless. And I try to always, I've not been very good about it lately, but always carry socks in the car. Because if you want to stop and think about it, somebody that's homeless frequently is afraid to take off their shoes. And they rain.
I'm trying to shift to unsheltered as the nomenclature for.
I'm sorry.
I know, but see, that's part of the learning thing.
Yes, unsheltered, homeless. I think it's synonymous.
But I think that the word homeless, just like in that word thing, it carries a lot of cultural prejudicial weight. Because I was talking to someone who is at the St. Luke's Shower Ministry, and he is temporarily unsheltered, coming to terms with the fact because he broke up in a relationship, and because of that, he didn't have a place to stay anymore. And it was important for his mental state for him to be reminded that he's in transition, that not having a house right now is not going to be his full identity. And when we see people on the street, either flying signs or walking with carts or carrying a backpack, if the first thing that I do when I see a person of that profile is to assume that they are homeless, I think it's very damaging both to myself as to not being able to see them as a human, and it's damaging to them because there's an entire culture of assumptions about why they are that way, how they got that way, which,
what did I just say? I don't ask.
right? But that's the only argument around the word itself, homeless versus unsheltered. It's just another way that I'm trying to shift my mind about it.
See, but I think what we're doing is getting down to semantics there.
Okay.
I think that there are much fewer people that are temporarily unsheltered than there are on the street unsheltered for long term.
Like in Hot Springs and Garland County, or just
Just
everywhere?
everywhere, I think. And I do want to finish about socks.
Okay.
That's my big thing, and I'm going back to it
All right.
because these people who get wet shoes in the rain because they're afraid to take them off for fear they will be stolen, have their socks dry in their shoes, and you cannot imagine, unless you've seen it, what happens to the feet when the socks dry and the shoes dry on the person's feet. So that's why I'm coming back to that. Call them what you want to. Doesn't matter to me. These are people that need something. It may be temporary, it may be permanent, they may be addicted, they may be, they may be prostitutes, they may be using their money for drugs. I can't help that. Right then, they have a need. And that's what matters.
Very good. Very good.
Sorry.
Do not feel sorry about
We have always had
your generosity. Okay, so one of the characteristics, I guess this would be, well, number 3, Paul, if you don't mind, is the overall theme for today's show is befriend. I think that one of the easiest ways of building community is becoming friendly with people.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get to know a human for their humanity, I think all the other stuff is a lot easier. And number 4 shows me the 3 qualities that I value in our friendship, which is openness, curiosity, and kindness. And that, I think, applies to how you and I interact, although we have been through all kinds of phases on that.
Yes. Yes, we have. And that's part of a friendship, is that it is workable. You work at your friendship and you try to be open about things. And if you disagree, you remain with the curiosity of why do you think that way? And I appreciate your idea about saying unsheltered. And I see that. I understand that. It's just a matter to me of words.
Mm-hmm.
This person doesn't have anywhere to go sleep.
Right.
To lay down, not a tent. Maybe a sleeping bag if they're lucky. And if they're lucky and they have to walk away from their little piles of things that they have. If they're lucky, maybe somebody won't steal
That's true too.
them.
Which moves me to slide number 6. You're lucky because this is the first time I've used slides. So
Oh, okay.
that's not 6. That's
Oh, no, we're going to Maslow.
Well, I just thought I would throw this in there as a framework for the audience that frequently in conversations, especially with agencies and organizations, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a word that gets thrown out. Well, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I know that the bottom tier of the hierarchy of needs is physiological needs, which are nutrition, air, sleep, shelter, clothing, which is temperature controls. And then what are the needs above it? And in Maslow's hierarchy, safety needs are the next part. And when humans are unsheltered, my experience is that the first level of needs is barely and inconsistently met. And the second level of needs is rarely met, which means that as a contributor to our community, social needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization needs never or rarely have the space to be addressed at all. And yet we have that expectation, going back to that first slide about what our ideas about homelessness are. I've heard many people say, oh, well, if they, would stop spending their money on drugs and alcohol, then they could get a job and show up for work, and then they could earn money, and then they could have a place to stay. When the reality is not like that at all.
You never know. They might be a felon and can't get a job. They might have the comorbidity of an underlying mental illness and be totally unable to function in a workplace. And that might well be causing their use of alcohol and drugs in order to deal with their voices that they might be hearing, or their thoughts that might be racing in their heads. And so I think that you've got to look at a whole lot more than just the basics of I don't want to go to work. It's, how did the people who really need to be treated in a different manner than they need to be treated in a mental health facility on probably a long-term basis, rather than be put on the street and left to try to fend for themselves. And what you brought up about safety, I have no idea about how many. I don't have the numbers, but you may, about how many women who are on the street that have been raped and molested. And that's another very honest, fearful thing for them to have.
Exactly. One of the, what do you call that? Blatant lacks in our community specifically is any kind of housing for the population of victims of domestic violence, single mothers with children, and then we haven't even talked about unsheltered children or not stably sheltered children, and the fact that our community needs to find the heart and will to address and support getting stable conditions for
children in cars. It's a sad thing. It's really a sad and very scary thing. And I wonder where the basic overall understanding is. There's money out there. There are people that have piles stuck back from government funding that are not building houses, are not doing things. I don't know why. I don't understand this. And that's why I've always just done for myself.
Well, so if we're really going to get honest here, because you and I have been talking about this since probably even before George Floyd, but since the killing of George Floyd and the ideas of inequity and institutionalized racism, is that what we're talking here? Or whatever kinds of inequalities keep the downtrodden and the people with the money, as you were saying that, clearly with the number of banks that we see in Hot Springs, there is money about. And I think that our community would be stronger if everyone in the community had their basic needs met on some level. And
Absolutely.
then our town could be so much more vibrant. I love Hot Springs. I think it has all this potential to be, a bright tourist spot, to have people doing good works in all the different areas. If people would just kind of get out of each other's way, which makes me think of slide number 9. Which is that there are some in our community that choose to elevate others, and that there is, to some level, some oppression happening. I mean, as a person who came not from around here and not being white, that my experience of this community is curious to me.
We've had this discussion.
I know, and I'm a little afraid that I brought it up now, but here it is.
I think it's there. I think that, I'll just say it, being a Southern white girl.
Well, exactly. That's what I think. It's like you're the local chick, so.
That is a thing that has been something I've had to learn as I've gotten older, and learning about inequity and inequality, and learning not to look at people as different or as others, learning to look at people as human beings, as who they are, and seeing the beauty in everybody. We're all beautiful one way or another, And I was so glad this changing the subject a little bit.
Okay.
I was just so glad. When you first came here, I was so worried that you wouldn't love Hot Springs the way I do. And I'm so glad you love Hot Springs, because I love this city. I always have. And it's like, you do not go out without driving downtown and going around the fountain. I've done that since I was a child. And anytime Kim goes with me, you make the loop. And thank you for loving our town and coming here and adopting it and doing the things that you're doing to try to help. And I'm glad that you can do things from a more formal, functional way, because I'm just not that person that could organize other people.
Well, there's a good question of whether I am capable of doing that. But I love you because the whole aspect of whether you're, if you aspire to be organizational, as I am a little bit, and you who prefer not to be stuck up in all that business, but that does not preclude you from helping other people.
No, not at all. Everybody can work in their own way and need to see that and to do it, And if somebody, people get put in your life if you're open to it, if you're willing to talk. It's just so surprising. People just tell me things. It amazes me sometimes what will come out of people's mouth, and I learn and I say, hey, what can I do to help this? You know, I don't know. I don't always get it. I don't always know what they're trying to tell me. But sometimes I'm blessed enough to pick up on it and am able to do something, you know.
Yeah.
And I do have to admit, my first love is cats. and the people came along with that. Because if you're out doing stuff like the animal stuff, you're in places where there are a lot of unsheltered. That's for you.
Thank you.
And that's part of how I met Sherry, whom I really want to talk about.
Okay. Okay.
Met Sherry several years back. And another friend of mine noticed her sitting on a sidewalk on a Thanksgiving day. And we felt like that she was probably hungry. And all alone, just piled up. I wasn't even sure if it was a man or woman when I first saw Sherry. And we went up to her and asked her if she was hungry. And that's where the first time I learned that lots of times a homeless, unsheltered person will say, maybe a little bit. And that means, yes, I'm really hungry. So I learned the hard way that in Hot Springs, it's very hard to find someplace open to get food on a holiday. So I went, and we had not cooked that year. So we went to the Dodge store of all things and bought
A great
chicken
local
and
resource,
yes,
actually.
chicken and potatoes and drink and things like that, and took back to her. And from that point forward, we had Sherry. And every day for 3 years, she ate what we ate, most generally. Some days we didn't cook, but she still ate something. And she was paranoid schizophrenic and sometimes afraid to come out and get her food. Had to figure out where she was on many different occasions because we would lose her because she would get afraid of the white snakes and the different things, and tried to put her in a tent, and she was too paranoid to get in a tent and desperately afraid of the rain. And it was so nice. The first time I took her a really hearty beef stew with lots of vegetables, and I almost cried. And she would always pray first. And she says, these are real carrots. And I thought, this is going to break my heart. I can't stand it. And bringing her a big homemade salad.
Yes, she did like salad
She
and
did love
pesto.
Yes, the pesto was a funny thing. I was worried that she would not know what pesto was when I was bringing her green spaghetti. And I look at her and she's just shoving it in her mouth and she's going, I love pesto. And found out later that she had a really good college education and had been abandoned here by a husband and had no idea where to go or how to get by. And we lost track of her after about 3 years. We did later find out kind of what happened to her and haven't been able to see her since. But she was a blessing. She was a real blessing. Also, another thing that knowing Sherry brings up is the issue of toileting for these people. You know, stop and think about, we have easy access to restrooms,
Mm-hmm.
and they do not. And that's a real, true, valid issue.
Right. I mean, there are so many levels about access to a restroom. I mean,
Yeah.
even on a road trip, when you start thinking about it, it's like, oh, there's a lot that you need to do to maintain your dignity that involves availability of a restroom. And I think as a human, if I had 3 incidents in a row where I could not get to what I would consider a
Right.
decent way to take care of my excretion, it would just blow my mind in ways that I don't think that I'm really ready to face.
Yes. I had one person tell me that rather than foul up the landscape, they would take a plastic bag and use that and then find somewhere to dispose of it that was appropriate. We have no idea how blessed we are. No idea. And also bringing up that is that there are those out there that can function better, that have more wits. Um, yeah, a lot of them are probably thieves. That's how they get their needs met. They steal stuff. They have this bartering system. They manage in that way. Um, they are a lot more savvy about living in an unsheltered state than a lot of the people who are mentally ill really have no business being left alone.
Right, right. And we, in the 80s, is it in the 80s that we eliminated the institutions that would take care of
Yes.
people who, I mean, one section of like agency and institutional concepts of care is permanent supportive housing. It's kind of a HUD tech word, but in essence, it recognizes that there is a population of humans that cannot live on their own, that do
Exactly.
not have the functional ability to keep a house and stay on a medical schedule
That's a real biggie.
and keep any kind of appointment schedule. And there are actually solutions of, competent humans with those competences matching up with humans that don't have those competences. I mean, we do this in a normal family situation a lot of times. We're always making up for, the weakness of our others and our friends. And that is not different when you are unsheltered.
Mm-mm. Not at all. Not at all. You see, people, I hate to name names, but back in the day when Ronald Reagan turned loose all the mentally ill patients, and they had discovered long-term antipsychotics. And people had the delusion that the mentally ill people would come into all these clinics they were going to set up once a month and get their long acting shots. No, forget it. They would think they were healed, that there had been some kind of miracle, that there, that it wasn't the medicine. They would forget that they were supposed to go get the medicine. And so thus you have people out on the streets, and then you really develop the comorbidity. And you saw so many people that, were coming into psychiatry to actually what should have been acute psychiatric units rather than long-term care, and taking up psychiatric beds that people who were acutely ill needed, and getting their needs met and being sent out in 72 hours.
And there's that interesting thing of the stories I've heard where if someone's unsheltered, they kind of make an option plan that rotates between getting into a psych hold, going to jail, and then being on the streets. And that this is a survival strategy of sorts.
Yes, it is. It's called "I'm suicidal." That's a very common statement by the homeless, the unsheltered. I'm suicidal. I'm going to kill myself. Some very probably rude people refer to it as 3 hots and a cot. And that's what I'm talking about, where people who are in acute psychotic breaks, who are truly indeed suicidal and need to be totally watched. You have people who are homeless, who are mentally ill, that need long-term care, taking up your acute psychiatry beds. But that's just a whole other issue.
All right. And then
Go ahead.
So what happens to me, my mind, when you say that is, that goes back to the my personal safety issue of, I want to help others. I also recognize that I am not a psych nurse or have that experience, and don't necessarily have the skills of approaching someone who's a little more off than I'm familiar with. And
just don't get too close.
Really?
just watch. And if they act like they're getting a little frightened, back up. Give them their space.
Okay.
And
So
if
it
they
doesn't
say-
have to escalate immediately to,
No.
I'm trying to help and now you're going to hurt
No,
me.
not at all. Sometimes there are things you just leave alone. If you can see things are not quite right. People oftentimes are not going to pay you any attention if they're grossly psychotic. They're busy looking at somebody else or something else that's in their mind, or at other places, and they're not going to be asking you for help. They're probably afraid of you. So
That's true. Yeah.
not all of them.
But we have talked about the same strategy that works for a stray cat can also kind of work for a stray human.
Mm-hmm. Just give them their space. Don't get hurt.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about number 7, which are Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
Oh boy.
Well, I wanted to kind of just put it out there in the public world that we may or may not be familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work in the, I don't even know what years, stages of grief.
Mm-hmm.
And they're divided into what? 5? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I guess traditionally it's described as a linear thing, and in practice it
It's
seems
not.
to be way different than that.
Yes.
So what do you have to say about that, and just in
And in relationship to
homelessness, the age of pandemic? It seems like the cultural conditions in our town make it super challenging for any human to navigate. And the suffering of repeated losses, I think, is one of those things that's really adding up for everybody. And if we become aware of a vocabulary to identify our own feelings around it, and then be able to apply that as cutting others slack for the same reason. Like, you've experienced many losses.
Yeah.
I've experienced losses. We've all experienced losses. And yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to say about the stages of grief is they really are not linear. And as you grieve, you go in and out and back and forth. And when you least expect it down the road, something will hit you and it will hurt you so bad. And you really don't expect it. When I lost my mother, of all the things it was, I had had her for 8 years, taking care of her with her dementia. You know that. It was the first time I went into Kroger, into the produce, because I had spent 8 years trying to find her the most perfect fruit that she would eat. And I had no earthly idea that it would hit me like a ton of bricks right there in the middle of Kroger.
Staring at a mango.
Staring at a mango because she loved mangoes. But the thing of it is you're looking at people who have lost their homes, lost their some of them, their families. They lose their clothes, their shoes, everything. They've lost their dignity. And, yeah, they're mad, they're depressed, they're all those things. And yeah, they might accept it at sometimes. And as I said, get pretty crafty and become thieves and become all those things that they have to do to survive, which I don't think I can judge because I don't know what I would do in their situation
Right.
to get by.
If I had no choices, I could imagine myself stealing to eat.
Yeah. You really have to put it right down there. What would you do to eat? So anyway, I can imagine that they grieve. They may at times accept it, and then it comes and slaps them in the face again.
And I would think that the accumulation of losses, the more time you spend on the street. I mean, I personally, in the time of pandemonium, mourn the loss of social safety on a relatively minor level, and don't have to deal with the idea that if I get up, I'm unsheltered, I get up and go to the bathroom somewhere far from where, a little far from where I'm bedding down, that I could come back to my bedding down space and have it not there anymore.
Yeah. Very true.
So
Very true.
it's these
Your
things.
backpack, your
It's these
robe.
things that I try to keep in my mind, and then there's an aspect that I don't want to think about it just for some other level of sanity. So do you have a recommendation of how to find the balance on that, being that you are a psycho nurse?
No, I really don't. I'm sorry. I think you just kind of go with it. You do the best you can. I don't know, you help the ones you can. And I mean, it's like the little boy with the starfish. I'm throwing back in the one I can. It didn't die. And if you look at the general totality of what's going on and knowing with our government the way it is, then in all probability, the the poor status is just going to get poorer and poorer, and more people are going to be out there, there but for you go I from Brigadoon. Yes, you know, you don't know who you're going to help, who's going to make a difference in your life.
I don't know. Brigadoon is where I first heard that.
It is for me. That is for me. There, but for you go I. That's a very lovely song, and it hit me. It's very much that there is where one person makes a difference.
Yeah. And especially, I cannot emphasize that enough in terms of like my vision of Hot Springs, Garland County as a community is there are so many levels, like Boyce and Janice from last week or last episode. Boyce's Watchtower Behavioral Health and Wellness. Janice's Food for Thought. They each do their outreach, and they have like a little orbital of people who support them. And my dream is that each of us has our point of contact with another, has a little network, and that we can make a finer and finer net amongst us to protect humans from suffering. And I guess, that becomes an essential question for me when you and I get on more of the philosophical, spiritual level, is the idea that people express this distance and othering of people without shelter versus people with shelter. And for me, it comes back to an idea of pain and suffering. And why would I not want to try to alleviate your pain if there was anything that I could do to help you feel better?
Yeah. I mean, why not? Why not? And that goes right back to where we came from in the beginning about why are these people sitting on money and not utilizing it to build houses, create these things that are needed so bad. It comes down to individuals like you referred to doing their things. Some people, everybody can work in their own way. And I mean, I wouldn't mind being part of some kind of a small group, but when you get in, for me, I'm a pretty strong, determined person, and I probably would get thrown out of the group because I would say what I thought.
But I think then that becomes another thing is, how do we learn to speak honestly? I mean, because I don't mind, well, sometimes I do, when you become a little bossy and highly opinionated. And,
I could never do that.
And we've gone through our phases of I get my feelings hurt, or I'm trying to bite my tongue about something that you said that set on me wrong. And then I have to put on my big girl pants and actually address the issue rather than sit in the corner and pout and say, this thing that you said, I must have misunderstood, or it hurt my baby feelings. And you're like, well, that isn't really what I meant or what I said, or, however our moods and opinions clash.
And that really happens when you get into committees and you get into this, as you get everybody that has their opinions and they think that theirs is absolutely right, and then nothing really seems to get done. So, who has the loudest voice, who has the most money, and all this stuff, and who's willing to be forgiving and loving and kind and do what needs to be done. That's what it's about.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to keep the eye on the greater good is always, yeah. And it's interesting to talk to you because in this setting, because I'm trying to pick my words carefully.
She doesn't want to make me go off.
Well, it's not the going off aspect, actually. It's I try to summarize things and then I use, a set of words that is triggering. Like if we talk about social democracies, or if we talk about a hand up rather than a handout, or there's all these terms that oversimplify really complex issues. And then I think that I'm taking the easy way out by trying to just pretty it up in 3 words rather than get into the nitty gritty ugly of, if I really do want to help a human, what am I willing to do? What is within my range to do? Can I find some friends to help us? So can we talk about our little interesting crowdsourcing Christmas project, not as a brag, but as what a few humans can do when they set their mind on helping somebody else?
Yeah.
So without disclosing too much information about people who should not be named, can you?
Well, let's just say somehow along the way I learned that somebody was working many hours just to get their children one present each for Christmas. And it really set on my mind. So I really hated to give money, but I did give a certain amount to help with that present or those presents. And I got to thinking and I thought, let's get together. And I'm going to start asking people for money or help or whatever. And I was just really shocked at people's generosity. Food. Somebody's brought a turkey, and somebody else handed me $100 bill. You know, um, somebody else, a young man, took his last $6 out of his wallet. And it has been just such a blessing. And now poor Kimberly has the job of wrapping all of the things that we are going to take on Christmas Eve and surprise these children, this boy and girl. We were able to get them not only toys and books and art supplies, but we have been able to get new coats. I've almost got enough money for new shoes, and we got underwear and socks, and it's been so much fun. Just so much fun. And I look at it as my Christmas present. It's not about them. It's about,
It's a little bit about them.
well, yeah, it's about them, but it is my blessing.
Well,
It
yes,
is
it has certainly
my
made
fun.
your Christmas spirit a lot more spirited
Yeah,
rather than just chores that feel like obligations. You
right.
have gotten way happier by being generous.
Sure. And this was somebody I have no idea about. I do not know how she got where she is. I don't know what her lifestyle is. I don't care. These little children, for at least one Christmas, will have a nice time. And that's all that matters.
That's good. That's good.
And
then I
you've
think
had fun.
and I think that it's interesting that you had an idea, you met a person, you had an idea, and just by, you would probably not call it leadership, but by you wanting to do something and that you have friends all around town that you've casually developed in whatever way. I mean, yeah, you've been able to raise and focus on a thing and then make it happen. So that is a very interesting creative process. And I think that if we address our creativity collectively, each in our own way, to solve little problems. I guess that's the other frustrating thing about like the waste of human resource of having so many people in poverty, not in houses. And I truly believe that everyone still has hopes and dreams. And in a kind of, you know, humanistic American way, I want everyone in my community to be able to pursue their dreams, because I don't imagine that most people have a dream to steal and hurt. I think that there's a higher dream that could be addressed and met if, you know, if I have those lower levels of my Maslow hierarchy met, then I can contribute to community and I can invent the new cool thing and I can get involved in civics and I can be more loving to the humans around me because my most essential needs are met.
I'm not going to argue with that. I'm with you. I'm with you on that one.
So how did, so is it selfishness?
What?
Our inability to address these community needs, I guess.
You want me to really say what I think?
Yes, I do. I do.
I think people are greedy.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're afraid of being there themselves.
Being where?
Where the person is themselves. They're afraid that if they deal with, quote, that person, that they're going to get dirty somehow. That they're going to be somehow less.
So you're
from
saying that
association.
So it's communicable, or it means that I'm going to lose my resources?
Both, probably. I think there's an issue of people thinking, you know, I don't want to do this interaction because, you know, for any number of reasons, I might change. I might get dirty. I might, you know, any number of reasons people will not or do not address homeless, whether it's on a one-to-one or in a big process. Don't get me wrong, there are people that do. Right. I see people all the time out there feeding people, helping them get phones. And I mean, I see people doing lots of good things, but there's so much more that could be done. And that's what I'm talking about, is the people that have the wherewithal, the knowledge and the time, and they don't want to get dirty and they don't want to lose their money. And I don't know, you know, it's just like, okay, why do HUD people not want to rent to the homeless? You know?
Why do HUD people not want?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
They're afraid they'll get their houses tore up. It's not a...
Oh, like landlords in Section 8.
Yes, it's not a profitable thing for them.
Right, because...
So there we're looking at money. You've got people that have been living on
tourism.
Exactly. And you might indeed find out that the people that are on the street might indeed take better care of the houses than a lot of the other people that just rotate through their houses.
That's not a lot of the reporting.
Maybe not. Though. Maybe not.
I mean, because the argument that I hear from landlords is that houses get torn up depending on how they vet their renters. And since I don't have a landlord's experience, I guess maybe that should be my next guest. Or
Probably.
landlords in Hot Springs. who
Probably.
do or
That
don't
was probably
take
not
Section
a
8.
good thing for me to bring up because that's not really something I'm very knowledgeable about, but I have heard about.
Well, but that goes back to the stereotypes in both directions about, why are people living on the streets or why are landlords, whatever. I mean, there are assumptions that go both ways. That's like when we're talking about me being racist. But we won't go into that.
I went for a long time without ever thinking about Kim being Chinese. I couldn't understand why she was so concerned with otherness. And I just finally thought, Kimberly's Chinese. I didn't think that was so other. She's just Kim. So I think that's part of it too, is we just, this is just Kim, and that's collectively we can put it down to this is just a human. It's not just some other person, it's a human. And we forget that.
Yeah, I guess and since we're we're past our hour. See how much time flies when you're
I kept wondering when we were going to finish our hour.
So I guess what's our takeaway? That otherness is not otherness, that works against us when I think of myself as separate, then that always makes me lonely. And I guess if I think
you're not separate. You're with me. You're with me. Okay. I may be an old southern white woman, but I love my Chinese friend that I didn't even realize much was Chinese.
Well, that's a whole other episode.
And that's how it needs to be. We need to see each other as
whole people.
Whole people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And that's about enough from me before I say something really bad. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Carol, for being here. So, yes, I guess that is the end of our meandering conversation about community and shelteredness. And I invite all of you to have a safe and happy holiday. Reach out to anyone you feel moved to reach out to, because in this day and age, connection on any level is, I think, a need that is not being sufficiently met by the current situation. So open your heart, be brave, let's love one another. All right, thank you.